of my life. In the darkness is the light.
Hello, everybody, and welcome again to the So Weird podcast. I'm Kat.
I'm Zach.
I'm Melissa.
And I'm Jimmy.
And this time we are talking about Season 3, Episode 25, Annie Song, the penultimate episode of So Weird. This was an episode written by Noreen Tobin and Jean F. O'Neill, the only episode either of them has ever written. And you might remember this episode for the iconic music video of Because You're Watching Over Me that would run on Disney Channel all the time in 2001.
Oh, wait, it's not just... One more thing about the writers, though. This is not just the sole credit, So Weird related credit of the writers. It's also the sole So Weird related credit from the director, and it is, in fact, her only credit as a director. Erica Berenger directed this. She's done a lot of assistant directing work, including on a bunch of episodes of So Weird. In fact, I think she was the assistant director on every episode of season 3. But this is her only actual director credit ever, not just on So Weird, period, which is very peculiar.
So Weird did seem to kind of incorporate a lot of female directors, which is kind of cool. It's cool they gave her a shot and let her kind of take the lead.
But what makes this strange, IMO, is that this is the, as Kathy said, or excuse me, oh God, I'm so sorry. As Kat said, the second to last episode of the season, the second to last episode of the series, the culmination of the entire season arc. You would think Disney would want somebody who has actually worked on the show's narrative before to wrap this up. It's so strange to me. It is, you could even say, so weird that they hired somebody who had never directed anything, who would never direct anything again, to direct this episode, and that they would hire two people who have never written for this series at all to write an episode that is ostensibly steeped in So Weird lore. It's all very, very strange to me. And I think it might actually be a reason why this episode feels, despite being the conclusion to the entire season 3 arc, essentially, feels rather disconnected from the rest of the series.
Good catch.
Yeah.
So I think you know how me and Zach feel about this. Jimmy, what's your take?
Well, I definitely thought that it was a good episode. I felt like she did direct well. I didn't really see any issues with the directing. I liked, when they were doing the performance with the tribes people and how it was kind of slowed down. I guess it was a little bit glitchy because you kind of had to pay really close attention to know when Annie was going into a memory, and then it would flash back. But ultimately, I felt like the director did okay. I'm sure she didn't realize at the time that this would be her last directing credit. But the writers, I did notice the two writers, Jean O'Neill and Noreen Tobin, they had worked on other things together before. They had both written a 1987 film called Down Twisted together, and they did a couple episodes of some different TV shows together. I'm almost wondering if they're a couple. I don't know. But I ultimately enjoyed it for what it is.
Okay, you can't just scan over the fact that these people wrote 8 episodes of Hercules: The Legendary Journeys.
Right, and
Jimmy.
Xena.
Xena, Trapper John MD. They were heavily involved with the short-lived Lyndon Ashby spy series Spy Game. And in fact, apparently, this is the shit you learn on IMDb, but apparently this Jean O'Neill fellow is also an actor and appears in 2 of Larry Cohen's movies, Chud, Cannibalistic Humanoid Underground Dwellers, and The Stuff, which is a movie about killer yogurt. So clearly we are dealing with some auteurs here, fellow friends.
Interesting.
They're kind of like John Cooksey and Allie Marie Matheson in the fact that they write things together a lot, which is interesting. That's partially why I think they might be a couple.
I mean, who's to say? But as far as the direction goes, it's interesting. You can tell this person actually has something of a visual style, which you don't see a lot in television. Usually, television is directed to be uniform. So here you can tell that there actually is some stylistic touches as a director, but usually, in my experience, I've actually written a lot about directors who have never made anything since. I have a reoccurring series on my blog called No Encores, where I do essays about directors that are about films that are the director's only credit as a director. And usually, when this happens, it's because the movie, or I mean, this is television we're talking about, but usually with a film, it was a huge flop, or the production was a fiasco, or somebody just really decided they really didn't want to do this again. You see actors directing once and then never doing it again a lot. But so that to me suggests that something must have happened behind the scenes to turn Erica Behringer completely off of ever wanting to direct ever again. And in fact, she hasn't worked much in general since then. She only has 5 other credits since this episode as an assistant director. So
I think it's kind of a stretch to just go after the director for this episode, but I do find it interesting from a writing standpoint that this episode is heavily based on wrapping up the story of Annie's mysterious childhood incident of getting lost in Peru, which was mentioned in her introductory episode, Lightning Rod, at the beginning of this season. So clearly, these writers got notes about where this episode should go. It's just unclear how much of it was them creating based on notes and how much of it they came up with themselves.
I did notice a little like inconsistency. I went back and checked the episode rewind when, remember, that college professor like translates the language that Annie was, I guess, backmasked in her song. But she stated that she actually lived in Peru when she was 3 years old. That's like her direct line. And then this episode actually credits the character as being 4 years old at the time.
Oh, there's
So-
no way that character was 4 years old. That girl looked like she was 7.
yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking 6 or 7, definitely.
Yeah.
I was thinking maybe Annie lived in Peru for a couple of years, starting at 3 years old. And she wasn't really sure what age she was when that happened because, you know, when you're an adult, you remember things as when you're a kid, but sometimes you don't exactly remember how old you were when something happened. So you only have so much to go by.
Something that kind of reminds me of like the actress looking a lot older than the character's age is like something that comes to mind for me is the film Interview with the Vampire. If you remember, the character Kirsten Dunst played as Claudia. In the novel, the character is actually a 5-year-old little girl, but Kirsten Dunst was actually 9 years old when she recorded that part, but the character in the film is supposed to be 5. But of course, they couldn't get a 5-year-old to play like such a in-depth episode with our in-depth film with lines and emotion, so they had to cast an older actress, you know.
Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
common for actors to be cast, older actors portraying younger characters. Usually they try to get somebody who at least looks the part even if they are older. I feel like it was a real casting fumble to go with a girl that looks so old.
And thank you,
Yeah.
Jimmy. I think that's our first Anne Rice reference on this podcast. So
I'm a huge Anne Rice fan. But yeah, and I did notice that the little actress who played Annie as a 4-year-old, her name is Cassie Deason, and this was actually the only acting credit that she has ever had in her life,
Huh.
according to IMDb.
so this episode is like the only thing a lot of people did. I just feel like this episode has ended a lot of careers.
Oh my, it's reminding me of Rewind.
But the question, I mean, I guess we should like get into the actual plot for this episode, but before we do
Yes.
any of that, I just want to ask everybody. Now, I have no recollection of seeing this as a kid. I think it is entirely possible I stopped watching the show by this point. But for the people who were watching and were very invested in the Annie's Magical Spirit Panther myth arc, do you just, in as fewest word possible, try to answer this question? Did you then and do you now find it to be a satisfying conclusion to that story arc?
I like the episode, but yeah, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a satisfying conclusion, but yeah, I like it, I guess.
For 9-year-old me, yes, I liked it. now, no.
Oh, we're talking
Uh,
about. Yeah, I don't remember watching it as a kid, but now.
Yeah, like 9-year-old me was all into like, let's go exploring in the woods, and oh my god, animals, magic, yay! So 9-year-old me ate this up.
Yeah, as a 13-year-old, that's the age I was when this aired. I definitely like really connected to it and I liked it a lot, but now looking back, I can see a lot of the issues with it, especially like what the hell was a rattlesnake doing in the middle of a Peruvian jungle? I don't know. I don't know if that actually is. I don't think there's rattlesnakes in Peru in the jungle, but yeah, I can see the problems with it now as an adult.
Yeah.
Well, that snake. Yeah, it. They could have gone with a lot of different things. I mean, there are all sorts of poisonous animals in Peru. I have no doubt. I mean,
I feel like we're getting too far ahead of ourselves because we haven't even actually gotten into this episode yet.
that snake, man. God. All right. So
So let's hold off on the snake for a bit. So anyway, now that it's clear a little bit of background information about this episode, you can kind of get a sense already about the different opinions you'll hear so far. This episode opens up with an intro about how Native Americans believed in dream catchers, and they also believed in Coyote, a spirit that liked to play tricks on people, either for fun or for serious reasons, like to teach them a lesson. And Annie sets it up as like, and sometimes that lesson can take us down a scary path.
ooh.
Like it feels almost reminiscent of Fee's introductions because you get that montage and you get to hear something semi-educational about a different culture. So I really like the introduction to this episode.
Yeah,
Agreed.
but the thing is, like, Coyote is one of 6 or 7 characters from American Indian mythology that gets referenced repeatedly in media. Like, there's obviously a huge wellspring of stuff you could draw from, but it's usually like Coyote or the Wendigo or one of those. Like, you never.
Yeah, and I found it really weird that they brought in dream catchers first because I think they did that just because that's what everybody's most familiar with when they go to a touristy attraction selling
Right.
Native
Yeah.
American stuff. And
Right,
I
yeah,
felt like
because
that's a really cheap grab.
Dreamcatchers play pretty much no role in the story at all.
Yeah, I noticed that. I was like, okay, she just totally changed the subject in that like 2-second intro. Like she just mentioned something like dream catchers, Native Americans, and then Coyote, who's a trickster god. Like, yeah, it was definitely like neither here nor there, and it was
Mhm.
random.
Like this
Yeah.
episode does seem very focused on Native American culture, and I have a lot of questions as to how problematic and or accurate this portrayal is.
Well, at the time in the 90s, and this came out in like what, 2001, 2000 and
Yeah.
maybe 2000. Okay, 2001. So it's still basically the 90s at this point. So there was this kind of almost fad like interest in Native American culture in the 90s. I mean, it's not. I think we're all a little more aware of the implications of a bunch of white people covering themselves in dream catchers and putting feathers in their hairs and saying like, oh yeah, my great uncle was 5% Cherokee, so that makes me an American, a Native American.
Yeah.
Where I think we're all more aware of the kind of problematic aspects of that. But there was this sort
Yeah,
of
dream catchers were super popular, which is why I
yes,
feel like showcasing them before going into Coyote was just a really cheap attention grabber.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was. And you just saw a lot. There was so much. I mean, Walker Texas Ranger was a show that was on time that was all about like this Native American spiritualism, and it's like that show stars a man named Chuck Norris, who is and there was a lot of that. Yeah, you saw a lot of like this co-oping of Native American spiritualism in all sorts of genre television and film and writing.
One thing I think that can be applauded, which happens in a lot of media even today, where there's kind of cast typing or they don't even recognize that the characters in the show, they don't even cast actors that are actually that ethnicity. So I think we can kind of applaud this episode for actually casting native actors to play these parts. I really did appreciate that about the casting.
I wondered if they were actual Native Americans.
Yeah, one person who I actually did a little bit of research on was the gentleman who played the shaman who is Conrad the Panther, or Panthy. His name is Sam Bob, and he actually is a native of Canada, and his real name is Tokwemolt, and he like lived on, like he had to go to a residential school. Like there was a lot of racism in the country, and he actually spoke on it in an interview. I wanted to read like his direct quote here. He grew up on a reservation, but he's a part of the First Nation in Canada, and he had to attend again a residential school. And he said that they received reconciliation from the Prime Minister of Canada, and the reconciliation came to the forefront when the Prime Minister apologized for putting these Native kids in this residential school. They would like pull them away from their parents, and they had to stay on these reservations. And he apologized for Canada to the First Nations people. And the actor, he said, we as First Nations people, we received the apology politically and personally. And having gone to Cooper Island Residential School and living through the injustice through a child's eye, there is no apology that will replace the loss of family and parental love and communal living that I missed out on as a kid. He said our reserves and our communities are still being affected by the fallout of these residential schools and all the wrong social statistics that we carry today, like suicide, native apprehension, drug and alcohol issues. And he said, for me, reconciliation will truly happen when we, as a country, Canada, can address all of these fallout issues in a uniform and holistic manner with inclusion and consultation from our First Nations people. So yeah, he definitely is a Native person and had even dealt with some of the racism in Canada back in, the 60s and 70s.
Wow,
Sorry,
man,
that was a lot.
that's pretty heavy, man. But at least like back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, they mostly cast it like Italian American actors to play Native American. So at least they don't do that anymore. At least they usually get actual Aboriginal tribal people to play these parts now. Usually,
The
unless
way
it's
it's
Johnny
handled-
Depp and the Lone Ranger.
The way it's handled in this episode, it's like the Native people are just there for show. We have our opening scene with Jack and the Bell family, including Clue, because Eric Von Detten guest stars in this episode, discussing Ned's desire for a vision quest to find yourself and have your spirit guide be revealed to you. But it's pretty clear that this is like a tourist thing for them to do just for fun. Like they're not really respecting it as a cultural thing. And when they go to talk to the cashier, who turns out to be the shaman Thomas Morningsun, he even says like this isn't a tourist attraction.
Yeah, and they do those type of things, where they'll kind of invite the public to come and watch their ceremonies and eat with them. Like these things really do happen, and where they're carrying on their traditional ceremonies, but they do invite the public to kind of pay, a donation and sit there and be a part of the community. So, I mean, it was kind of glazed over and it definitely seemed kind of whitewashed, but I mean, these things do take place.
I would totally attend one if I could.
When I
And
was a
it-
kid, we went to some Western frontier thing, and part of it was Native American based, but it was all like selling dream catchers and just putting on shows, and it didn't feel authentic at all to me. And I feel
Well-
like that's part of why this episode bothers me, because again, none of it feels an authentic examination of culture. It all just feels like putting on a show for the sake of a plot.
Well, there's a problem here, right? Like this is an entire episode all about you have these Native American characters in there, you have this use of Native American mythology, but it's all in service of helping a pretty blonde white girl resolve her problem. And I think that is what truly makes this particular story problematic, as the kids say.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And the fact that they don't even mention like the name of the tribe that we're viewing, we don't even know where they are or what tribe we're watching,
And
kind of
there's
a
also like we discover soon enough, and this has obviously been hinted at before, but the root of Annie's story with the whole Panther thing takes place in Peru in the Amazon, and the episode sort of treats it all as the same thing as.
Hmm.
I mean, we don't know where they are. We can assume they're somewhere in either Canada or the Pacific Northwest. And like it seems to treat that brand of Native American mysticism as not dissimilar from the Peruvian Amazonian brand of Native American spiritualism, and that too is short-sighted at the very least. I mean, whether or not it's offensive is not really our place to say as a bunch of lily white people, but yeah, no, it is just it's clumsy. And it's clumsy in the way a lot of pop culture stuff at the time was.
Yeah.
And I guess if you look at it like from the aspect of like, okay, they're visiting this tribe, and then it was this like this shaman, who is a shaman because of his father was and his father before him. So like he saw something in her when they were talking about Vision Quest, and he's like, you've already been on your Vision Quest, and you don't even know who your spirit guide is, and you don't remember. And like the whole point of Coyote is that he takes you past your fear and helps you remember remember your past, and that he can show you who your spirit guide is. So maybe just like not so much that it kind of clumped it all together to be like one race or one tribe, but that just them being around this tribe, that shaman was able to identify in her that she had forgotten where she was, or that there was the panther following her.
I
Yeah.
really wish they had given us a line that explains why they're there. Because they're not there for like a concert or a benefit or anything.
Well, there's a little line where Irene's character, she says, it's off the beaten path, but I see why you guys wanted to come here, or like something like that. So they kind of like took a detour to like, I guess, go to this ceremony potentially.
Yeah, but like we don't know where they're going, why they stopped here on the way. It just seems very random, and like
I mean-
clearly this episode exists just to explain Annie's background, but I wish they would have tied it in better with like a reason for them being there.
Yeah, now that you mentioned that, yeah,
Well,
I
and-
agree.
Okay, so not to jump around too much, but I feel like actually, I'm totally gonna jump around here, and Kat's
Oh,
gonna
please
yell
don't
at me.
jump around.
Jump around! I came to get down.
Oh my god, no.
Jump on your feet and jump around. No,
Mrs. Doubtfire, that's what that reminds me of.
I completely lost my train of thought now. So
No more jumping around for you.
okay, so I guess we should say, the spirit of Coyote possesses what's his name, John Thundertree or some shit.
Thomas Morningsun.
Okay, Thomas Morningsun is taken over by the spirit of Coyote, and he decides to basically composes this scenario where he can get Annie alone in the forest so they can have their little spirit vision quest thingy madoodle. So a young girl goes missing, or seems to go missing, and a search party is assembled, and of course the Phillips go on this search party, and Annie gets separated from the group in the woods, and this is when we get the entire point of the episode, our big flashback.
Okay, I feel like you missed a couple really important points there.
All right, well, reprimand me then.
I'm not going to reprimand you. I'm just going to mention that before we get to the part where we see Coyote, the guy, before he's possessed, sees Annie, tells her that she's already had her vision quest, and then he gives her this cryptic warning that she must be careful because, and then the warning's cut off by the announcement, and Annie just leaves without asking for the rest of the warning, and it feels like such lazy writing. Like, why doesn't Annie pause a minute and ask him for the full story? Instead, she waits, and then he gets possessed, and then it's not him anymore, so he can't finish warning her. And also important, at the end of that scene, Clue wraps around an arm around her, and it looks really cute, and I wish it were Fee so badly.
Aw.
So what you're saying is, in lieu of any Carrie Molly moments in this episode, you seized on this one little moment as something to feed the eternal shipper that lives within you. Is that what I'm
Yes,
hearing?
yes, that's what I'm saying. Also, I find it very peculiar that Carrie has like no lines in this episode at all. It's like because Eric Von Detten was back, they were like, let's make Eric Von Detten do all the talking, and we'll just shove Eric Lively into the back.
But he
If
did have
this-
like a couple lines, like that one line when the lady's like, "This is the work of Coyote," and then Carrie's like, "I'm not following you." And then
Yeah,
at
I
the
know.
end, wasn't it Carrie who like asked, "Where's Annie?"
Yeah, but like all
Yeah.
the dialogue from all the characters that aren't Annie or the shaman are like such throwaway lines. The writing of this episode bothers me so much.
I mean, one line that isn't a throwaway line that I genuinely laughed at was when Ned was like, "When we get back to Hope Springs, I'm going on a what did he
An
say?"
exercise regimen.
Yeah, I laughed so hard at that.
There's some good Clue moments in this episode.
Yeah.
Give credit where it's due.
Clue, yeah, he has a lot of good moments in every episode he's in.
Yeah, I feel like they just shine the spotlight on Clue whenever they could, and nobody else in this episode matters.
Right?
Yeah.
Starring
like,
Eric Von
e-
Detten.
And even when they are in the woods, it's the shaman with Annie, Ned, and Molly. And the shaman and Annie, well, the shaman isn't really the shaman right now, he's Shaman Coyote. And Annie are talking about the panther, like right in front of Ned and Molly, and they don't notice. All they have to say is like, "Oh, we must be the only people still in the woods right now, and I don't hear anybody else." Like
Yeah.
they basically one after the other say the exact same thing.
Yeah, and one issue I had with the whole scenes when they're in the forest is whenever Annie's having like a little breakdown, I feel like Molly like ordinarily would be a little bit more concerned if she saw Annie acting like that.
I'd
And
be a
but
little
she
bit
just
more
wasn't.
concerned about how predatory the shaman seems to come off on. Like
Yeah.
even him just asking, "It must be scary for a little girl to be lost in the woods all alone. If that happened to you, do you think you'd be scared?" And I'm just like, why are you asking me that?
some
Like
some
she
serious
legitimately
creeper
freaked out.
vibes there.
And then he gives the creepiest laugh.
Yeah.
I definitely noticed like how cringeworthy it was, and then the fact that like Ned and Molly are right there, but he's like up in Annie's face like several times during that little, escapade through the forest. I'm like, wouldn't they be like, "Why are you? What is something wrong with her? Like, get out of her face! Like, why is she
Yeah.
that close to her?"
Like they should be putting space between Annie and the shaman. Because like I never picked up on this as a kid, but watching it now, like it's creepy. Especially
Yeah.
because of the way he talks to Annie. Some of his lines are things when he's trying to get her to remember her past. He's trying to get her to open up about what she is remembering. Is like, "Oh, you can tell me. I'm a shaman." And it's like
Yeah.
that's so creepy.
I think it's because it's the coyote, not actually the shaman. Because coyote is basically a predator.
Hmm,
Oh,
That's
that's
creepy.
true.
Come on, that's creepy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like his delivery, like his line delivery that made it seem so like cringeworthy, like ugh. Like
Well,
the
yeah.
guy at the job that you're like, ugh, why does he talk to me like that?
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
probably totally not deliberate on their behalf to insert that kind of uncomfortable like is Annie gonna be okay,
Undertones,
guys?
yeah.
Like should we call the cops?
Yeah.
I feel like it's just writing that did not age well at all.
Yeah,
Like so many things about this episode.
which kind of makes me wonder, like you can almost understand why Disney is kind of like ignoring this show's existence because of like all the issues that, say it airs now, like maybe this newer millennial audience would probably just pick it apart online, and maybe they're afraid of that, like some of the backlash it
No,
might
I
receive
don't think
because of-
so.
You don't think so?
I don't think that has anything to do with it.
No, I think that's I just Disney just doesn't remember the show exist.
No, I think
Right.
they
Yeah.
remember. It's from a different era. It's from when Disney was into dramas, and now they're into comedies. It doesn't match the brand that they have become.
Yeah, agreed.
But anyway, while they're all lost in the woods, it turns out the little girl Maria that they've been looking for was just hunting around for pine cones. And she's safe and sound, but the shaman, Annie, and Molly and Ned are still lost in the woods for most of this episode. And then during this time, we get the flashbacks to little Annie running around in the Peruvian jungle and coming across an indigenous man who's like frozen.
Okay, right. This is the most important thing we got to talk about. This flashback
Yeah.
sequence.
And as he's frozen, oh wait, before this, another creepy thing that the shaman said was, you better stay on the path. You never know what kind of animals are out there waiting. And it's supposed to foreshadow the snake, but looking back on it now, it just seems so predatory. And then we cut to the flashback with the indigenous person frozen and little Annie being like, hi, and waving at him. And then it turns out there's a rattlesnake in the woods. And
Totally oblivious to the danger.
yeah, and it lunges and just bites Annie. So the indigenous man carries Annie over to this little hut where she is fanned with like palms and stuff. And a healer sucks out the venom and then breathes it out like smoke, which is so unrealistic.
Very, very unrealistic. But this is yet another example of bunch of indigenous people getting together, bunch of racial minorities getting together to rescue the pretty little white girl.
And the fact
This-
that they make it sound like magic, and no, like it's homeopathic treatment, and it should look more like that.
Well, the magic is forthcoming. He's a magical shaman cat. He has to do it magically. He can't just take the venom out. He has to use magic.
Well, he couldn't have used a leaf or something.
It all has to be magic, Cat. I think you're missing the point.
But the blowing it out is what bothers me. Like,
What,
I
like he's
feel like-
vaping it? He's vaping the snake venom?
Yeah, I know I'm getting ahead, but now I'm like thinking about it. He comes out, he turns into Annie's panther. Is the panther him dead now, or what?
Wait, we need to get his speech. Okay, first of all,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. This person seemed very androgynous to me, but then when they spoke, it seemed like a man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so this person gave this little speech to Annie saying, you will be safe now. You will return to your world beyond this jungle. By taking the bite of the snake, you saved my son's life. That is a gift I can never repay, but in return, you will always be protected. I will always be with you. And then he turns into the panther. Like,
Yeah.
the panther is essentially an animagus. And this is a Peter Pettigrew situation where just like there
Dropping
was
some dank
a
Harry
man-
Potter references in here.
Yes. Like, just like it wasn't a little rat sleeping in Ron's bed, it was a grown man. Like, this has been a grown man watching over Annie as she sleeps this entire time.
Yeah, okay, that's weird. when you frame it in that context, that's but
Yeah. But at least they chose the right animal. I mean, I don't know why I didn't do research on this before, but apparently Black Panthers in Native American culture as a totem animal, it's very fitting. Apparently, as a symbol in a dream, a Black Panther is mostly a sign of danger. If a panther crosses your way, then you are protected from everything bad. I'm like, okay, at least they chose the right animal.
Yeah, they definitely chose right. That's a really fitting description.
But something I have to say about the animals in this particular episode is, well, first off, the shots we get of a coyote when we have that wonderful 2001 television budget CGI of the coyote spirit entering, John Thundertree's body.
Thomas Morrison.
Yeah, whatever. And so like there's that, and it's like that is clearly stock footage of a coyote. This actor was nowhere near a coyote. He was not in the general vicinity of a coyote. And the exact same thing happens later with the anachronistic rattlesnake in the Peruvian rainforest there. Like that is a snake that was probably dead decades before this episode was released. They clearly pulled that up out of a stock footage archive somewhere. And it's just kind of like they couldn't have thrown a rubber snake at somebody at the very least. I mean, something, an actual human interaction here. It was it's
I'm
just
really glad you brought up the likelihood of it being stock footage because there's this one clip of the coyote running away, but it's very clearly not running. It is very clearly fast forwarded walking.
Huh.
yeah, and we got to talk about that that convincing, wonderful jungle set the flashback sequence is shot on. Like, wow, those are some plastic ferns there, you guys. I'm just
Yeah.
pretty sure that's the same set the series Jim Henson's Dinosaurs was shot on.
Yeah, I didn't even notice. So I did notice the set where the Native American thing is taking place at, because I accidentally stumbled upon it when I went to Vancouver one time.
Oh, that's
It looks like the totem poles in Stanley Park.
Really?
Yeah.
Where they were?
Yeah. Well, at least the very beginning, where you see all the totem poles and everybody walking around, it looks exactly like that. And also the gift shop is really there too.
Wow.
Yeah.
So back to the Panther transformation. Do we think that this person just sacrificed their entire life to transform into an animal and follow Annie around and protect this little white girl forever? Or
it certainly raises a lot of questions, doesn't it?
Well,
I always just wonder if the Panther is like him dead now or just what up.
or if maybe he was immortal, or like
Maybe.
how the coyote possessed Thomas Morningsun, and then he's like, I've been traveling these forests for hundreds of years.
I
Like,
love
maybe
that line.
maybe he's like possessed with that spirit of the panther, and maybe he just like a part of him just kind of lives on in Annie. But it is
Yeah.
kind of funny to think that like she's going through this vision quest and he's probably like eating some food over in Peru at the exact same time, like
Well,
totally
yeah, no, like,
unfair.
is this Peruvian tribe now without their shaman? Did he like, I mean, is he like transferring his spirit into the panther, or is he
But like it very
literally
clearly it was him literally turning into the Panther.
right?
And that is what I find so problematic. Like if he had conjured a panther to protect her, if he had like done some incantations and summoned it to protect her, like that would be one thing. But to suggest that this panther that's been following Annie is really a grown man, that's too weird for me.
That
Yeah.
is so weird. You should even say. But I want to talk about like, okay, so I'm about to get down and dirty on Annie here. Annie stands, leave the room. So this is to me emblematic of everything wrong with Annie as a character.
Yes, preach it.
Yeah, because she doesn't actually do anything. Instead of going into this scenario and like she makes no attempt to rescue this random Peruvian tribesman she comes across. She just literally by standing there, she saves his life, and now she is forever bonded to this panther spirit, which will do anything and everything to keep her safe. Up to the point where presumably, maybe, possibly, depending on how you look at it, the shaman of this tribe has devoted his entire existence to protecting this girl who has gained this wonderful, magical, literal magical plot resolving gift through no actual actions of her own. It's like, and that has been my problem with Annie from the very beginning of the series. The plot happens to her. She doesn't drive the story in any way.
I mean, Annie in that scene is a child. What can she do?
Well, they shouldn't have written it that way.
Yes.
Yeah, I get what
The
he's saying,
pool-
because it's like most of the episodes, it's just kind of like you're saying, the plot happens around her. Like whereas with Fee, it was like she would go and she would push the protagonist. Like, she would be out there like to find the story, to fix the story, and she drove the story.
She
Whereas
would bitch
Annie, it's
at
kind
a
of like,
banshee until she got what she wanted. So
yeah. And Annie just kind of stands there, and then like all this stuff just kind of comes to her and happens around her, and then she just ends up, floating away perfect. And
Right.
yeah,
that
it's
is
funny.
fundamentally why season 3 is bad.
And also, this is like the culminating arc for Annie. And this was set up in the very first episode of season 3 Lightning Rod. And it was built up as this big, terrible mystery that something happened in Annie's childhood where she gave her parents a scare in Peru. And her mom, Lisa, wouldn't talk about that. Like, if all it was just getting lost in the woods, why would you keep that a secret? Like, I got lost in a drugstore when I was 4, and I never heard the end of it because it was like, okay, don't wander off. You're gonna get lost again. Like, why would you hide that from your kid?
Yeah,
Well-
it doesn't make sense.
Well, it's like it's the most anticlimactic conclusion to this that they possibly could have done. I mean, I guess it could have been worse. I mean, there probably is something dumber they could have thought of, but it is
Yeah, but
just
there are also so many things better that they could have done. Like, for how much of a reaction Lisa had in Lightning Rod, I would have been more impressed if little Annie had been corrupted by a wisp, not Brickaroo, but another one, and they took her to a witch doctor to make her forget it or something.
bum,
Because,
bum,
like, an
bum.
evil Annie with a spirit animal that stops her spirit from being corrupted would have been pretty cool. Like, even if it was something to stop her from turning into, like, the cool, rebellious Annie.
Oh,
Like,
this is
that
where
would
the
have
timelines branch off, is what
Yeah.
you're telling us.
Mm.
That would have been an amazing way to connect some of the season 3 storylines together. No, I mean, I don't know what would have been better, but anything could have been
Yeah.
better. I mean, it's such an anticlimax. And, like, I don't think they thought it out. Like, I don't think when they wrote that line in Lightning Rod about it being this mysterious thing that happened to Annie in her childhood, I don't think at the time they knew what the mysterious thing was. Especially since obviously they hired writers who had never worked on the show before to do this episode. So it just says to me that nobody was really thinking that hard about it. Nobody was really making an attempt to make it all make sense, to make it all work. Which is, in contrast to the season 1 and 2 writers who were so invested in the storyline they plotted out that they are still talking about it on our podcast to this day. So, I mean, it just that to me is a big problem. I think this just sums up everything I dislike about season 3. Nobody really cared that much. Like there wasn't that heart put into it that was put into the first 2 seasons.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the season 3 fans in the audience will heartily disagree with me, and I will get angry letters.
And also, to other season 3 fans, I really want to know your opinions on how the Native American culture was portrayed in this episode, because this is something I feel super ignorant about, but I really feel like this episode went about it the wrong way, but I also feel like I'm not in a position to really make that comment, so I like to hear other people's thoughts on it. The thing that bothers me is, like, in the speech where he tells Annie that she's going to go back to her world, and he makes it sound like the jungle is a world all to itself, in the
Yeah.
sense that, like, being with indigenous people is different than being with white people in a profound way, like it's on a different planet, when it's like you're part of the world. It's a different culture, not a
Yeah.
different planet.
Yeah, I was seeing it as maybe like language barrier, maybe, and because obviously English. How does he know English, anyways?
That's another good
Well, I mean, at a certain point, you just have to say with the it's a 25-minute episode of children's
Yeah.
television, you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it was probably just like a language thing. Obviously, if he knew English, somehow it wouldn't have been his first language. So, language is my cop out.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously, like, the thematic elements of the episode are I wouldn't say go so far as to call them offensive, but they're definitely ignorant. They're definitely poorly
Yeah.
done. But I mean, I think the way the writing of the episode itself is just so disappointing. I mean, everything about this, it's pretty lame. Like it's a bummer, man. I mean, like if you had to told me when season 1 and 2 were airing and I was super into the show, and if you had told me that this was how So Weird was gonna end, I'd be like, man, that's bogus. I'd be so disappointed. You know, it's a bummer.
Like my first time rewatching the series, that was legit my reaction. Like, what? This is Annie's big storyline? That's so lame.
Yeah.
Like all she did was get lost in the woods. It's nothing compared to
I
what
get
Phoebe did.
lost in the woods all the goddamn time.
Got lost in the woods too as a kid. My neighbor had to rescue me on her quad, and it was fun.
That sounds like a better story than this one.
I got lost in the woods last time I went to Canada.
Did you meet Sasquatch?
No, sadly not. I did come across like the most beautiful pond I've ever seen, though.
Clearly, it was a magical experience then.
Yes.
And none of us had to rely on somebody else to come save us.
Yeah.
Wait, no, that's a lie. I did have to rely on somebody else to come save me.
And
For
they
the
had
since that Annie did. My neighbor doesn't still come around and be like, "Hey, you need a ride on my quad?" No, because that's
He's
not
not-
this one.
your neighbor and his magical quad is not there to resolve every conflict you get into ever for the rest of the time. Well, clearly your life is not written by Disney Channel room writers at this point. Jimmy, you're being very quiet.
Well, I guess, yeah. I mean, I totally agree with you guys. Like, there's really like no excuse for. I mean, and I think it was I think Belinda Metz told me that it was actually on the set of Gone Fishing when she found out that they weren't going to be continuing the show. So they were pretty far into this season when they actually found out they weren't going to be continuing it, which is kind of scary to think that we might have actually got, a season 4 that continued this Annie story. But yeah, I do think it's kind of a letdown just how lazily they treated the character of Annie. I mean, they could have made her so much, I guess, just made her have more things to do, or like we were talking about, like to be able to actually like drive the story and not just kind of sit around while everything happens around her. So
I
I
feel
mean,
like
I
that
totally
was the
agree.
point of Annie, though. I feel like she was the very definition of a Mary Sue. And she was set up that way from the very beginning, where she was introduced as this girl who can pick up any instrument and play it without any training whatsoever. Like, she was just this miracle girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've talked about this before. I've always felt season 3 there was just this desperate, hungry need in all the scripts to make the audience want to like Annie. Like, oh, look at how cool Annie is. Look at all the cool things she can do. And meanwhile, we're just all bitter and angry and asking, "Where's Fiona?"
Unless you were 8 years old or 9 years old like I was, because I
Oh.
totally bought into it.
Well,
I
yeah, of
loved
course.
Annie.
I guess
wanted her hair. I loved her cool laptop. I thought it was so much better than Fee's.
now that's blasphemy. I'll give you the hair, but the laptop is no way cooler.
It was cool. It was orange, okay?
It was
Yeah. Yeah, me personally, I did not like Annie at all at the beginning, when I was watching it when I was 11 years old. And I actually quit watching it very early on. But as an adult, I started appreciating her. I always compared to when I was watching Doctor Who the first time. I hated Martha right off of the bat because she wasn't Rose. I just get so attached to the characters, and if they're replaced, I just don't like it.
It was my first ever existential crisis when my allegiance was torn between Fee and Annie. And like I didn't want to believe my sister when she told me that it wasn't planned for Fee to leave. Because then if it wasn't planned, then I felt like I was betraying Fee by liking Annie, and it bothered me so much.
Well, and thank you for saying that, Melissa. You reminded me now. I know for a fact I did not see this episode when it originally aired because I remember seeing Dead Ringer which I wish I really had wanted to be on the podcast for the episode, but I just couldn't make it. But I remember seeing that and thinking it was so bad that it would like So Weird had forever jumped the shark and would never be good again. And I bailed on the show at that point, which is ironic because there were all of 2 whole episodes left at that point. I should have just stuck it out. And also funny because now when I go back and rewatch season 3, Dead Ringer is actually one of the better season 3 episodes, I think.
Yeah.
So
yeah, Dead Ringer is one of my favorites in this season.
yeah, I mean, at least it's about a character we actually care about.
Yeah.
But let's I mean, I feel like we do perhaps need to give some room to the Annie lovers in the audience and say, like, I mean, I suppose for them, is this a pivotal episode? I mean, it
Well-
must be.
Well, there's something major we've been neglecting, and that is the end of this episode. This episode is iconic for that music video.
I know.
And to be fair, Because You're Watching Over Me is such a pretty song. Like, I love it. It's hands down the best song of season 3.
Yeah, season 3 best song Annie has for sure. I was just saying that on Twitter earlier. Basically saying that song is just so iconic.
In my
Yeah, and-
review for this episode, I refer to Somebody Watching Over Me as uninspired pop drivel. I might have
to
been
be
a bit
fair,
harsh, but
In my notes, I compared it to S Club 7's Never Had a Dream Come True. But like it does
what?
have
What is that? Is
Oh my
that
god,
a
you
thing?
don't know S Club 7?
S Clubs?
You
No.
don't know S Club 7?
Oh,
my
oh, no.
god.
What did I
Did you
do?
watch Fox Family when you were younger?
A little bit. I
Okay,
watched real Ghostbuster reruns on that network.
Okay, well, there was this show called S Club 7, and it was about this British pop band who comes to
God.
America to make it big, but they end up working at a hotel and doing odd jobs trying to make it. And in, I think it was like 2001 or 2002, one of their biggest hits was Never Had a Dream Come True. And go listen to it on YouTube and tell me it doesn't sound like Because You're Watching Over Me.
Right
It
now?
has the same, yeah, instrumentals.
So this was like Spice Girls, the series,
It was-
basically.
Yes, it was actually created by the same people behind the Spice Girls.
Right. This
Mhm.
is what Wikipedia is telling
It's
me.
basically Spice Girls with boys and girls.
Yeah, I have one
Okay.
of their albums, like, to this day. I do like S Club 7. My favorite is Hannah Spirit because she actually played in Seed of Chucky. She was
Nice.
she was the chick that Glenn shot with the fire, and she like falls down the banister like all on fire.
oh yeah,
And-
when he's Glinda, you mean?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
See, now
Hannah
you're
Spirit.
speaking my
She-
language. And now
she was a singer in S Club 7, and she played in Agent Cody Banks #2 as well. She's cool. I like her.
My
you know,
favorite was Paul. I was in love
Really?
with him when I was 8.
Oh,
And then he left, and it
You
made
know-
me sad. And I stopped watching.
I am sure I must have seen this as a kid because I was absolutely in the target demographic for this, but I have completely forgotten about it. I have no recollection of this program nor this band at all. And we are way off topic now.
But anyway, Because You're Watching Over Me is a very pretty song, and it is classic early 2000s.
yeah, and it was probably the turning point, like, for me, because I know I've definitely said this several times about like every episode that Alex Johnson sings in. I'm like, that was the hands down moment. But this was probably the moment where I was like, that's my favorite singer because her voice is so pretty.
yeah.
And I mean, her music after this, like, she really emotes that same kind of feeling that song has. You know, it's like a really melodic, almost kind of gloomy, but yet very bright feeling in that song. It's so
Yeah.
beautiful the way she emotes that song. And we actually did get a demo with the demo singer singing that song as well. That's available, I believe, on the forum somewhere. But yeah, so we have 2 versions of that song. Sadly, we never got like an actual studio version. We only have the episode rip, but beautiful.
At least the
song.
episode rip is very good quality, and there's nothing like
Yeah, there are no laser
Getting
sound
into it.
effects over it.
yeah.
Right, and no dialogue. Yeah, it's super beautiful. And I mean, I still listen to it to this day, like on shuffle. When I have her on shuffle, if that song comes on, I'm like totally caught in the moment. Like I love that song.
Yeah,
Agreed.
like they introduced Annie because they wanted a pop star, and in this episode, they got it.
Yeah.
To the point where she just launches into these fully produced, glittery synth riffs, pop song in a backyard somewhere, just out of the blue. Just pulls that out of her hat. That's the real magic, right?
Right.
Conrad on keyboards somewhere. Just
Yeah,
There
that
was actually an episode of Instant Star where somebody commented that there was a figure in the background that looked like Conrad. It's somewhere on Conrad's Hideout on LiveJournal. I need to look for it.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
wonder what episode of Instant Star that was, because I do not remember anything in Instant Star, and I've seen all the episodes.
Well, clearly we have to start an Instant Star podcast now. No.
Hey, not a bad idea. Like she sang so many songs for that show.
Pretty
Like-
much in every episode except for season 4.
I don't think
Yeah.
I've seen a single episode of this program, you guys.
Well, in season 4, she does sing all the songs, but it's like when we actually got the soundtracks, they used other actors to cover
Oh,
the
okay.
songs because she was
Yeah.
signed to a record label, so they could no longer release the soundtracks under just her name. So they had
Okay.
like other actors come in and record her songs. Like so you it's like she did all the songs in the show, and then when the soundtrack came out, it's like all these different singers singing her songs. Man, we felt so let down by that. I was
Yeah,
pissed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's some bullshit right
Yeah.
there.
I honestly only care about the first 2 seasons of that show.
Are you serious?
I like the songs from all the seasons, but when it comes to sitting down and watching the show, I only really care about the first 2. I've seen all of them, but after season 3, I'm just lost. I think because I really loved Juderman.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So,
Oh my god, you guys.
yeah, I was gonna say,
Conrad's Hideout is gone.
Oh
you
no.
serious?
Oh
Oh,
no.
but I can't find it.
Okay, wait.
Maybe we can find it during on what's
Yeah,
that?
Web Archive.
Wayback Machine.
I'm
Yeah.
so sad. I
What?
love
Hopefully
How-
it still
Hideout.
exists somewhere.
How have you not just had this entire website, archived, Kat? I mean, I feel like you, of all people, should-
As much as you reference it.
I know, I should have.
Hopefully it's on Wayback Machine like they
Googling it
screenshot
now.
it.
Well, like the makers of that also had like this so weird, oh my god, LOL website, and it had like the best screen captures of the characters making the strangest faces and the so weird drinking game, but that wasn't captured by the Wayback Machine either.
Okay, well, I just stumbled upon the Molly Carey Love Is Broken fan site here.
Yes, that was
'cause-
also the same people.
Because when you Google So Weird Conrad's Hideout, a post, I think you're the one who probably made
Yes.
this.
Yeah, that is me. That's what I did.
Okay. All right. That's the first thing that comes up. And let me click on the link to Conrad's Hideout. I'm assuming you had this bookmarked. So,
I did.
yeah, no, this is taking us to a Wayback Machine HTTP 302 response. Oh no.
Oh my god. The original site on Angel Fire doesn't work anymore.
Well, it might just be sometimes I still have some Angel Fire websites I check on a regular basis, and sometimes they go down for Angel Fire is down right now, I think.
Okay. Hopefully
So
it'll be
Conrad's Hideout may be safe by the time this episode comes out. Listeners, please let us know the status of Conrad's Hideout. Do not let this treasure be lost forever.
Okay, I just checked the Wayback Machine and it's there.
Awesome.
Cool.
Ooh,
In
All right, I
all the
feel-
glory of Annie with little horns on her.
yeah, all the glory of early 2005 internet. Well, earlier than that. It says 2006 down here, but there's no way this website was made in 2006. So anyway, Annie's song. Not a great episode. Not a great
No.
episode.
Great
Very
song, not a
disappointing.
great episode.
Are we ready for ratings here? Have we, or do we have anything else to say about this particular slice of fried gold?
Something do they name it Annie's song just because of the song, or is there like a reason for that beyond that?
Well, at the beginning of the episode, when Molly and Annie are in the gift shop, Molly's humming this tune, and Annie says that sounds familiar, and Molly's like, "Oh, don't you remember? Your parents were the ones who taught to me. They used to sing it to you all the time when you were little." And then
Oh.
after Annie goes through her flashback in the woods and remembers everything, she wakes up sitting against a tree and singing it to herself.
I completely missed over those details. I mean, I remember the one in the dish shot, but I completely I did not notice the part where she woke up to singing it to herself.
Well, you
Yeah.
gotta think, like, this is a big difference between genre television now and genre television in 2001. Because, like, if this show was doing this storyline now, it would have been, like, stretched out for the entire season. It would have been this huge arc that they're building up to. It would have actually had a
Yeah.
satisfying conclusion, probably. And knowing the way genre television tends to go, it probably would have gone on for years and years and years, and we all would have been sick of it by the time it was finally resolved, because that's just the way TV is written anymore. But back then it was just like, yes, the second to last episode of basically the season finale, because the last episode is going to be a clip show. So we got to wrap this shit up now, you guys.
Yeah. Okay. Do ratings.
At the time, when I rewatched the entire series, I gave this a 5 out of 10, which in
Really?
retrospect seems almost too generous. I think maybe a 4.5 is a little closer to where I'm actually at with Annie's song.
That's actually generous from me, because I know I liked this episode as a kid and I still love the song at the end, but watching it now, this episode is just so icky to me. Like, it's worse than I remembered, and very disappointing and problematic due to the creeper undertones, lack of any meaningful dialogue from the rest of the cast, the letdown of Annie's lame past, and just the WTF moment of her spirit animal being an actual adult human being this whole time. So this episode gets like a 2.5, maybe a 3
Oh.
for me. And those-
Ouch.
Yeah. Because, like, I don't enjoy this episode anymore. I'm sorry, but I don't. I loved it at one point, but the points I give it now is all to the song at the end, because that song is still beautiful, but it still creeps me out to think that she's actually singing about a grown man watching her as she sleeps.
Well, I mean, at least we forget that Twilight was a huge deal in 2012 or whenever the hell that movie came out. So there's obviously a portion of the world that's totally thinks that's cool. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I did too when I was like 15.
And now we all know better.
Yeah, like you grow up and you realize actually that's not such a great idea after all.
Pretty much.
So, Jimmy, your rating?
I think I'm gonna give it like a 4 out of 10, just because it is the conclusion. It is the end of Annie's arc, and I mean, I always really held it kind of like in a sentimental light. Like I really liked that tribal music, and I don't know, I guess as a kid I really loved it. But now as an adult, I could look back at it honestly and say, man, they really, dropped the ball with this one. And again, like Kat's rating, like I have to chalk it up to the song, that the song is so sentimental to me and beautiful. But yeah, I mean, it could have been so much better, but so could the whole season. So 4 out of 10.
For me, I will probably say 5. Yeah, 5 out of 10. Mostly for all the reasons you guys already mentioned. It seems like a weak ending to this whole plot. I do think a lot of things are a lot of things you mentioned were a little bit too thought about. I mean, it's season 3, so weird. If you don't think about it, it's a good episode.
If you don't think about it, it's a good episode. Truly the highest of recommendations.
Yeah. If you don't think about it, a lot of season 3 can be good, but yeah, like to not think about it too much. But yeah, it's 5 out of 10, mostly to the song again. But yeah, I like it a little bit more.
I really wish Emily was here so we could get her trying to explain her thumbs up, thumbs down, second to last episode of the podcast, and I still don't get it. But
I am guessing
Yeah.
she'd probably rate it 1 thumb down, 1 sideways thumb.
no, I'm guessing probably like we're Emily, come on the show and defend yourself. But anyway, yeah.
Either that or Emily, just comment below. Tell us your thumb rating.
Yes, no, she's listening. She'll be listening to this, please. So do we have, before we totally put a bow on Annie's song? I mean, since this is more or less this, I mean, there's one more episode, but this is basically the series finale for So Weird. I mean, surely we have something more momentous to say. Surely.
But
No?
like the characters, it's not meaningful. Like, we had Clue back for this episode, and that was good. That was something that I didn't account for in my rating. And that's because, like, even Clue's lines, like, Clue's always been the comic relief character, but it's all jokes with him of like, oh, well, I want to go somewhere with food. And despite being in college, she's just getting dumber for some reason. And then Carrie gets almost no lines in this episode at all.
Well, and once again, Molly is sidelined. I mean, like,
Yeah.
and though at least, like, I feel like we haven't seen, now granted, I've skipped a couple episodes, but I feel like Irene and Ned have had even less to do this season, like, to the point where they haven't been in a couple of episodes. So at least they were brought back. They don't really contribute anything to the story, but at least they're there.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have been missing, like, pretty much the whole season. I feel like, anyways.
And I also feel like Jack has very little to do in this episode. I mean, it really is all about Annie
Yeah,
and
like,
her magical mystery panther.
all Jack does is provide some background information about vision quests and offer to go get Annie at the end, and Molly stops him.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
do we have anything else we want to discuss this evening, this fine August evening?
We do have a couple comments from Gone Fishing.
Already? So that one's not bad. I gotta say, I just to do a general thought on Gone Fishing, I think that one is okay.
This comment comes from Corey on the Gone Fishing episode. He says, this episode was only the second or third episode I got to watch live, and like the fourth Annie episode I'd seen. I had a slight fever, so it seemed so surreal to me that I kind of love it, or at least that memory of watching it the first time.
I always feel like it's super special when you can remember how you felt watching an episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I definitely have had that trying to watch a movie or a TV show while sick or feverish, and it's you tend to remember that kind of stuff. It's
Yeah.
it's a very
For me,
unique
it was
way to
being
experience.
sick at 4 years old and watching Aladdin and the Den of Thieves on VHS that my mom got me from the library.
Aw.
Aladdin and the Den of Thieves, or the King
Yeah.
of
I don't remember. I was sick.
Okay. I remember I had a hideous cold and was sleeping on an air mattress in my sister's unfinished attic watching the Fantastic Planet and L'Age d'Or, which are both two very, very surreal French films, while very, very sick. And let me tell you, that was a night. So
Hmm.
all right, so our next email is this Andrea, or is this some other
Yeah.
Andrea? Okay.
That's Andrea.
All right, this is from Andrea. Is this on Go Fish?
Yeah.
Gone Fishing.
Gone Fishing. Okay.
Go fish.
Go Fish, that was an episode of Buffy. But okay, so yeah, this is from Andrea on Gone Fishing, and she says, This is another good review. It has been a while since you all posted the last episode. I, too, thought about the fact that evolution takes a long time to come about in nature, but for purposes of this episode, I like to let myself believe that fate or some sympathetic paranormal force allowed the lake man to transform so that he could remain in the home that he loved. And also, I like to think that maybe he eyed the little boy's hot dog because he just missed the taste of human food. And not to mention that the fish supply is clearly running low in the lake, so one way or another, he is just about to get something to eat. He's just out to get something to eat. I cannot believe that you are down to 3 episodes for review. I know how you all have talked about the writing falling short and not fitting in with the timeline of the first 2 seasons, so I cannot wait to hear your thoughts on the few mistakes that should not have been made in the Dead Ringer episode. Molly's saying that the family moved into the house in the mountains when Thea was 3. Jack was 5. Excuse me, but Fiona was 3 when her father died, so that means the family moved in within a year of Rick's death. There would not have been time for the family to build so many memories that Molly felt haunted enough by his memory to sell the house. And in Lightning Rod, the Thielens not only come over to the Phillips house, but Annie also says, "I totally owe you an apology for the last time I was here," meaning she had been there before. There's no way she should have known which house belonged to the Phillips.
Yes.
Wow.
All great points.
I'm sure you brought up every single one of those on the episode.
Yeah, we did.
And just to clarify, the reason why the timing is off is because at this point that we're recording, we've already recorded the episode for Dead Ringer, but it has not been posted yet. So if it seems weird that we're reading this comment on this video, that's why. But yes, I agree with all of this, Andrea. Thank you so much for bringing it up. And I also really like that comment about the lake man going to steal the little boy's hot dog because he missed the taste of human food. That's a good take that I didn't think of before.
Yeah, and I do like the part where she's saying she lets herself believe that fate or some sympathetic paranormal force allowed the man to transform, because that's one thing I did not like about that episode. How I guess he basically evolved like a Pokemon. Rather than how evolution actually works.
But yeah, and you know, and once again, I know I say this every single time, but you know, thank you, Andrea, for being a constant presence on the show, for always writing to us, always having wonderful feedback. I've said it before, I really do feel like you are I know we were up to 5 or 6 hosts technically now, but I do feel like Andrea is the 5th host always. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is
So
that it
thank
for
you for
feedback?
always being psychic. She's a
Yeah,
psychic.
no, absolutely, she has. I've made that comment before.
Yeah, she rocks. So, we definitely want to send our love to the Johnson family. If you didn't know, Alex Johnson's sister, McKenna Johnson, recently passed away. She lost her battle to cervical cancer. And we had just interviewed Alex, and about 2 weeks later, we got the terrible news that her sister had passed away. So that's why we are waiting to the end of the podcast to actually post our interview with Alex Johnson out of respect for she and her family. But definitely send your love to Alex and let her know that you're praying for her and her family. Sad news.
And unfortunately, we have even more sad news. Right now, Chris Gibson has a GoFundMe going. Chris Gibson played Rick Phillips in seasons 1 through 2 of So Weird, and he is in stage 4 of prostate cancer. So he really needs help campaigning for his cancer treatments. So if you would like to donate, we will include a link to the GoFundMe below.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can give, please do.
Thank you.
It
Yeah,
seems
sorry
that
to
way.
end it on a dark note.
Well, we don't have to end it there. Did you guys talk about the Disney Plus announcements?
Not in the last few episodes.
All right. Well, I guess we should mention that they have released more information about Disney Plus. In fact, they just released today that apparently for $12 a month you'll get Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus, which is a pretty good deal. Anyway, they said they released a list of some of the stuff that's going to be on there, and of course, So Weird, nowhere to be seen. Now, I'm not totally, giving up hope here, because I think there's still a lot of things they have yet to announce. But at this moment, pretty underwhelmed by what we're seeing in that regard.
But it might be a good time to hit up Disney Channel's media team on Twitter or what have you. Maybe track down some email requests and be like, hey, we want to see So Weird on Disney Plus.
Actually, I guess the Disney thing, and I forget what their event is this month.
Oh, what is that? D23 or whatever?
Yeah, D23. They're gonna have it available, like for people to try out there. And I'm like, damn it! I live in California. I could technically go, but I'd probably be missing a day of class, which starts next week. And plus, yeah, money. So if anybody else lives in California and wants to go and tell us what's on there,
Or
Yeah,
just tell us if
yeah.
So Weird is on there.
Yeah, we need a So Weird podcast fan in attendance at D23 giving us intel. Well, guys, do we have anything else we want to bring up tonight, or?
I think that about covers it.
All right, I'm so glad I could be. I know I've been off the show for a couple episodes because I won't get into it, but I have had some change ups in my life, just busier with things, and but I am glad to be back, and especially since this 3-year journey of ours is very nearly at an end.
Don't say it. I'm gonna cry.
Hey now, don't dream it's over.
So I think the next episode is gonna have all 6 of us.
We're gonna try and
for
pull
the
that off.
Final episode.
Yeah.
We'll
Try to
try
make
to
sure.
all be available at the same time, same day.
Thank you once again for listening. This has been the So Weird podcast. I'm Kat.
Zach.
I'm Melissa.
And I'm Jimmy.
Keep the faith. Never give up on So Weird. And if you can, please send your love to the Johnson family. And if you can donate, please do so for Chris Gibson.
Absolutely.
You are